Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the program. It's Tuesday, March 24th, 2020. How are you guys doing? I hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone is staying occupied and not losing their mind. If you're in a place that requires you to stay inside. If not, then enjoy your freedom, I suppose. Today's going to be about the mysterious mammoth bone structure that I talked about in the radio broadcast from last Friday. If you haven't heard from there, then this would be a treat for you guys. But I just wanted to follow up because I did spend some time on it during the broadcast, but I want to really go a little bit further because a different article came out in regards to the mammoth bones, and I wanted to give some more information on the site itself, which is very interesting, and then kind of fill in the context after giving like kind of a broad overview of the situation, right? Because this is not the first mammoth bone site that they found, although it is the biggest. It offers this article offers a few interesting details about this mammoth site and the other mammoth bone shelter sites that are smaller. And and I think this would make for a good discussion as well in the comments. So if you guys already know all about this, then please share your knowledge with us in the comments below. So this this discovery revolves around a site called the Kostenki site, which in and of itself should more accurately be called a complex, an archaeological complex. Basically, this place is divided into 21 archaeological sites, divided into 10 stratigraphic layers. So they just call them the Kostenki 1 to 21 sites. This has been a really interesting discovery for a while now. It's been talked about mainly in the past 50 years or so, but the earliest mentions of the site go back to 1703, and that is one of the first mentions in the record by Cornelius Brogen. Cornelius de Brogen. He's a Dutch adventurer slash I guess he was close to Peter the Great or something like that. Yeah, anyway, so he mentioned about finding elephant bones there, and they kind of hypothesized that they were either killed or they had trouble crossing the river, which again is called the Don River. But anyway, I'm bearing the lead here. So here's some quick background information of the site itself. So it dates to the Upper Paleolithic, so about 40,000 years ago to 26,000 years ago, although it could be much older than that in terms of the occupation. The complex covers an area of about 30 square kilometers, which is on the western bank of the Don River. So you can see here, this is kind of like a diorama type of model that they made. This is a river here, which itself flows southeast to southwest, so kind of zigzags. Yeah, here's a map here. Let me open this up. So this is the Don River here. And then it basically flows into the Sea of Azov, which is north of the Black Sea. And it's the fifth longest river in Europe. The legend is that the Slavic nomads are said to be native to this river and its basin. So it's the Volga-Don region, essentially, which is thought to have been the homeland of the Proto-Europeans about 4,000 BCE, so about 6,000 years ago. This has really nothing to do with directly anyway with the mammoth site itself, but I just thought it's interesting because it has history to it and a lot of speculation with it. And the Greeks thought this river was a natural barrier between that separated Asia and Europe, and even the Greeks thought that the Amazons, the story of the Amazons, they originated in this area as well. So it's just interesting stuff to take with a grain of salt and to keep in mind while reading this stuff. The Kostenki site is known for high concentration of anatomically modern humans dating to before 40,000 BCE. So they found bones and tools alike, as well as fire pits and stuff, which we'll get into later. They also think it's highly probable that Neanderthals occupied the area at some point because they detected a decline of Neanderthal traits throughout the demographics of the area, which is pretty interesting as well. And it would make sense that the Neanderthals did occupy this site. The period that the AMHs, the anatomically modern humans, again, that they occupied this site, again, about 40,000 BCE, roughly, and that's about the time when the Neanderthals died out. So I thought that's all that stuff is it kind of lines up, so to speak. It adds up, at least insofar as that goes. There are also two humans that they found, two males that they found, and I thought it'd be interesting just to detail that before we go into the actual discoveries. In 2009, they found the Kostenki 12, which was a male between the ages of 20 to 25, lived about 30,000 years ago. They checked his DNA and they saw that it belonged to the Y-DNA haplogroup C1 and the mtDNA haplogroup U2. The Kostenki 14 individual that they found dates even further to 40,000 years before present, which is also in mtDNA haplogroup U2 and the Y-DNA group C1b. So a little bit different from Kostenki 12. Another interesting thing was the volcanic ash from the Campania, which is in Italy, the Campania eruption event, which took place about 45,000 years ago or so, if I'm not mistaken, give or take a few thousand years. The volcanic ash was found in layers above some of the finds. So they're some of the tools anyway. So anything low, if you guys know anything about archaeology, I feel like a broken record. I mention this all the time, but the lower you go, the older stuff is. And they found this volcanic ash, which is sort of like this time capsule, this time marker essentially. And the stuff under it, they found tools. So there were people living there before the volcanic eruption, essentially. So I thought that was really interesting as well. And also the name Kostenki itself, it derives from a Russian word called bone. And I thought that was interesting. So anyway, let's just get into the article here. So the area itself, and let's just go to this this map here. This number one is the Kostenki site. So you can see this is the Black Sea here. And right above it is where the site is. And then about 200 kilometers or so north of the site is where Moscow is, which at the time of the Upper Paleolithic, right around the last glacial maximum, or right before it rather, there is an ice sheet where Moscow is now. So that's indicated by this dotted line here. So at the time when the site was in full swing, this area was tundra, steppe tundra, and a little bit of alpine desert, which for the longest time they thought it didn't have that much wood, or if they did have wood, it wasn't usable. But then they found out that, they were burning wood and they had some of this stuff. So that indicates that there was some sort of trees, some sort of vegetation there as well. And this would have been really cold. And again, it just adds more to this mystery of they have not just this one mammoth bone site, but a ton of them. And they were lighting fires and probably storing food and drying food perhaps in there. But anyway, so this map is really useful in just kind of filling in the geological context here and the geographical context here. And you can see there's a lot of other sites here as well. They're a Mesolithic site, but then the Kostenki site is by far one of the oldest in terms of modern humans. And then they also mark the number 10, which is Denisova Cave, and the number 2 is the Malta MA1, which I've talked about in the past. And MA1, it's from this discovery that they link this group with Anziquin, which was found in North America. And if you guys don't know about Anziquin, I highly suggest you guys go and do your homework on that. Really interesting stuff. And then they even have Otzi the Iceman here, number 8, which is in the Alps here. But anyway, I'm bearing the lead. So they found this in Russia's forest steppe, a huge circular structure built with the bones of at least 60 woolly mammoths. So they think it's about 25,000 years old. And how they built this 40-foot diameter building is just up in the air still. And how they killed 60 woolly mammoths, they don't even know how that happened either. And that's partially because 60 woolly mammoths, if they did do that in a short amount of time, like that's an impractical amount of meat. one woolly mammoth could feed a ton of people. So 60 of them in a short amount of time is just weird. Alexander Pryor, who's the archaeologist, is the lead author of this study, which was published in Antiquity. He says that clearly a lot of time and effort went into this building, and so it was obviously important to the people that made it for some reason. The Kostenki site itself is the site where many important Paleolithic sites lie clustered around the Don River. So if we just go back, this Don River here is very significant in terms of human history. Not just because there was water here, but there are a lot of megafauna and vegetation living here as well. So it was, even though it was pretty cold, it was still an ideal site to get some resources if you're a human living at the time. Other things they found were fires, food scraps, and the fires were burned within the structure itself. Vegetables, pits containing mammoth bones just outside the bone circle, and which may suggest food storage. Since, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of meat from a mammoth. If they were harvesting it on a large scale like that, then there's probably some sort of food processing in place, some system in place, and a food storage system in place. So they knew what they were doing essentially, and that implies a lot of other stuff. If you just use your imagination, what that would require to even get to that point. Again, some cooperation, some sort of established, agreed upon rules for in the community, and ritual and all that stuff. And all that stuff implies, again, an established culture. People have also speculated about a likely ritual element to this. I just mentioned that. The fact that they may have designed a structure for this type as part of both their ritual and their sustenance activities is very reasonable, and that makes a lot of sense here. And here's another map. Yeah, that's Moscow here, and then Kostenki site is up there, or down here. And you can see that's about 100, 150 kilometers or something like that. So similar structures have been found across Eastern Europe, albeit on a much smaller scale. So again, that's indicative of some sort of, maybe not a universal culture, but some sort of relation between cultures. And you can see that not just in architecture and religion and language, but also in these very peculiar and specific structures, the way that they're built using only mammoth bones. And they're still scratching their heads trying to figure out why specifically mammoth bones. When they could have just used wood instead, they still went with the mammoth bones, which is very interesting. These sites, including others found at Kostenki during the 1950s and 60s, date back as far as 22,000 years. So this one predates it by 3,000 years for sure. Which was, again, this new structure was first discovered in 2014. The size of the structure makes it exceptional among its kind, and building it would have been time consuming. Yeah, this is like a hard part to reconcile, right? How could nomadic hunter-gatherers in a place that has a harsh, cold environment, why would they even spend the time doing this? So that implies, again, free time. It implies some sort of security net in terms of resources. Things probably were in abundance for them, so they could divert their time and attention to ritualistic things like this. And this is what Dr. Bosch, a zoologist from Cambridge, says. This implies that it was meant to last, perhaps as a landmark, a meeting place, a place of ceremonial importance, or a place to return to when conditions grew so harsh that shelter was needed. And it is a truly exceptional find because, again, it's before the LGM, or depending on who you ask. This site specifically, if it's exactly 25,000 years, that would put it right at the LGM or right at the onset of it. So again, I mean, before any of this came out, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I thought, like, my idea of the Ice Age, especially the LGM, would be, wow, people are just huddling together and just waiting for things to get better, essentially. But really, that's not what happened at all. It seems like they were not only carrying on with their rituals, but they were thriving as well. Even Pryor says, I cannot possibly imagine how they would have roofed over the structure. And yeah, why would they? Maybe if it wasn't, it definitely wasn't a house. It was definitely used for either some practical purpose like storing food and drying food because they had cooking hearths in it, or or some sort of like makeshift, not a make, well, it can't be a makeshift shelter either. So it must have been some sort of ritualistic or maybe even religious aspect to it for some reason. The smaller mammoth houses in Eastern Europe feature more definite cooking hearths. They contain the remains of reindeer, horse, and fox, which is very interesting. Nothing else. It was just exclusively woolly mammoth remains with some reindeer and foxes. Just very peculiar. They don't, again, they don't know why that is. With no other animal bones, this doesn't look much like a dwelling where people lived for a while. So again, it seems very deliberate. Not only its construction, but the food that was there. The vegetables that were there were I think they were just like tubers or carrots along those lines, and then those 3 different pieces of meat from 3 different animals. This new structure is the first of its kind to yield evidence that its occupants burnt wood inside and not just bone. It's the first time anyone's found large pieces of charcoal inside one of these structures, so it does show that trees were in the environment. And I mentioned earlier that they couldn't say for certain if there were trees there. Just as an aside, if you look at North America at the LGM, and you look at the Cordilleran and the Laurentide ice sheets, they went way down into what's currently the United States. And what they found was there were coniferous trees growing right outside the boundary of the ice sheet. So very similar things were going on here as well. I showed you the picture of the ice sheet here, and there were now for sure that there were trees growing there. So the tree ring widths they measured in the charcoal are narrow, suggesting that the trees probably struggled to survive in that landscape. Yeah, it was rough for sure. Coniferous trees would have endured in forests stretching alongside riversides like those close to Kostenki. So again, a draw for people looking to survive. But I don't think these were just people. These might be people on a pilgrimage. Like, I don't think they were like desperate to survive, like stragglers coming off of a natural disaster. I think it seems to me that they were people who were professionals, who were very skilled at this, just from looking at all the evidence that's out there and trying to connect some of the dots that are out there. Again, that's a huge assumption, but I just have the inkling toward thinking that fire in the past can be seen as a tool, much the same as chipped stone implements and worked bones are. Fires provided heat and light, barbecued and roasted food, dried meat for storage, and processed glues for stone-tipped tools. And we do know that they were using glue back in those days. It also used as a light source, which obviously would make sense. If there are people gathering inside the structure, they need to see each other, right? Other things that they may look for are drops of fat on the floor. They didn't find that, but if they do, then it could show that meat was dried over the flames. Their local diet appears to have featured a bunch of vegetables. I mentioned earlier, they discovered pieces of plant tissue among the charcoal. And at this specific site, it's the first time they have a plant food component discovered in the structure. So the other smaller ones didn't have any evidence of vegetation being roasted or cooked, essentially, or even present at all at the site. They haven't identified the exact species, but the tissues are similar to modern roots and tubers like carrots, potatoes, and parsnips. I just mentioned that. And here's a cool picture. The structure seen from above, so you can see it's pretty much a huge circle. And yeah, that's gigantic. I think it's 40. I think it said 40 meters across. So yeah, that's a huge site for sure. I don't actually. Yeah, 40 meters seems pretty big. What was it? I think 40 foot. Yeah, 40 foot in diameter. Sorry. So again, the question of more than 60 mammoths raises the question: where did they all come from? So they're not sure if the animals were hunted, which would be a huge. That would be a huge monumental task. I don't think they were hunted en masse like that. They also think they might have been scavenged from sites of mass death or some combination of the two, which makes a lot of sense, the combination of the two. Um, there must be something about the topography of the site that makes it a place where over and over herds of mammoth are coming through and can be killed or will be killed naturally, like a river crossing. And that's what Cornelius de Bragen was saying in the 1700s. He said that it looks like they died while crossing the river. So the guy 300 plus years ago was saying that. So I think that's a valid hypothesis, a valid theory that that you could hold on to until more evidence comes out. Pat Shipman goes on to say, I can imagine no way these people could possibly kill 60 mammoths at a time because proboscideans are smart, which is true. They're super smart and catch on if members of their herd are being killed, even with modern automatic weapons. So yeah, they'll know to leave, to get out of Dodge if other mammoths are being killed. So yeah, it must be they either might have stumbled upon these, like maybe some sort of a regional mass extinction might have happened, and maybe because of that, because the humans survived, that they held those bones sacred for whatever reason because of some natural phenomenon that occurred, and they bore witness to that. That could definitely be make a lot of sense, because they would have not only lived through the event, and these mammoths didn't, but also maybe they thought that it was some sort of divine intervention or something like that. Some were arranged in the same order and position as they were in the skeleton. That means the bones were brought to the site as body part, which some soft tissue were still attached. So they must have been transported before carnivores had the chance to eat and clean the bones. So it implies that the builders had early access to the mammoth remains. So maybe they saw something coming. Maybe they saw some sort of natural disaster coming. They went into shelter, whatever it is, to be safe. After it blew over, they were the first ones out. And that would make sense, right? Because if you leave a body in a forest or something like that, the remains of an animal, it won't last till the end of the day. Some birds will get at it, scavengers will get at it, bacteria will get at it. It'll be absorbed into the environment. But if something happened and regionally speaking anyway, things died, there wouldn't be any animals alive or around to scavenge it in time. And so it does make a lot of sense that humans were among the first to find these. So here's some more pictures of the excavation site here, and you can see it's a huge circle. And I'm willing to bet that there's a ton more sites like this. That would be really interesting to see. The complete settlement shows several mammoth bone dwellings, walls, enclosure, pits, working areas, hearths, dumping areas, and butchering areas. So it's an entire complex. It seems like they had some sort of system in place to not just process these, but to really master these skills, and spread their culture. Essentially, it's really interesting that they were. This is signs of a thriving civilization, or some sort of, not just a tribe, but I think this was a significant site for these people who maybe they might have been living on the fringes of an even greater society. Who knows? But I just think it's a lot of this entire area is just worth looking into even more now, because you can see on here that it's kind of aside from the other mammoth stuff, that the other mammoth buildings that they found in Eastern Europe, that in this region, there's really nothing else around here except number 11, which is the Vindiha site, which dates to around 33,000 years ago. So again, that's almost contemporaneous with this site here, the Kostenki site. So perhaps there's more that they just haven't found yet. There's evidence that there were natural freshwater springs in the area, which would have remained liquid throughout the year. So that warmed water would have drawn animals, which in turn would have attracted humans to the same spot. That makes a lot of sense too, because they know for sure that there were natural spring water there, and that's going to attract all kinds of animals for sure. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this. What insights have you gleaned from here? I think it's super interesting that not only that this exists, and there's a whole complex, a whole region of these, and everything that we talked about, but also that people were discovering it 300 years ago, and probably even earlier than that. because this area has been continuously inhabited either by Neanderthals or other humans for a while now, and I think there's a lot of information out there that's yet to be unearthed. So anyway, stay tuned for Friday. Friday I'll do the 2-hour radio show again. The link will be in the description, and I'll hopefully I'll have something either Wednesday or Thursday, another episode here, because I have a backlog of stuff. But it's just been hard to make ends meet for because of this Corona thing, having hours cut and stuff like that. So yeah, so we'll see what happens. We'll play it by ear, but please leave a comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, send me some messages on Twitter, so we can keep doing that segment. I'll try to get to. Well, I will get to your comments in the segment on Friday. So leave some stuff, leave some interesting articles. I saw some articles the other day by Mario. They were really interesting as well. He translated some more stuff there. So check that out, and I'll talk to you guys later.